Vermont will have a new attorney general in January to lead a team of state lawyers prosecuting crime, defending the state from lawsuits, and advocating for change at the State House and in the court of public opinion as well. The Republican and Democratic candidates are here this morning. First, the new kid on the block, selected by party leaders to be the nominee only a few weeks ago. We're meeting him for the first time this morning. Joining us this morning, Mike Taglavia from Corinth, Republican candidate for Attorney General of Vermont. Welcome to NBC5 In Depth.
Thank you for having me.
I gather you are down the road at a friend's house because you live off the grid in Corinth. That's an interesting...
That's correct. I live on 115 acres in a log cabin on a gravel road, and I love it.
You did not go through the primary process, so we are meeting you for the first time. Tell me a little bit about what prompted you to throw your hat into the ring for AG.
Actually, my journey regarding that started about 2 years ago with my rep, Samantha LaFave, in Orange County. I believe it's District 1. I met her at town meeting, spoke with her a little. She expressed her need for help. I offered help, got involved with Orange County GOP meetings, then state committee meetings. And at one committee meeting on August 21st, my name was brought up and I was drafted and nominated to replace H. Brooke Page, who actually reserved 4 slots. And he withdrew from the Attorney General slot, and I accepted the nomination to be put on the ticket.
But why do you want to be Attorney General?
I think that I can help make a difference. We've got public safety issues. We've got rising crime. A lot of the rising crime, I believe, is caused by drug addiction and drug dealing issues. And I want to bring a law enforcement, law and order method to trying to address that, while also giving help, medically assisted treatment to those who find themselves in the court system because they find themselves so desperate they need to commit a crime to obtain their drugs.
You are 59, moved to Vermont permanently in 2019. Tell us a little bit about your background. You were a small business owner in Maryland before coming here.
Yes, my wife and I lived in Maryland for 20 years prior to moving to Vermont, where I worked a little bit in private business. And then I had my own pool service business as well on Eastern Long Island and decided that I needed to get back into that. I had a pool service business for, I guess it was about 12 or 15 years in Maryland of my own. I assembled a team. We had a good customer service record. Customer service was basically what I sold. All of my customers' pools were mine, and I treated them as such. When elected Attorney General, I plan on treating Vermonters as my customers, and I will serve them to the best of my ability.
Have you thought much about your priorities? I gather you're not an attorney, but you would lead a large, essentially, the public law firm.
That's correct. I am not an attorney, and I'm not required to be Vermont statute or the Constitution. But I think that's a good thing. I hope to break the echo chamber effect. I want to be able to bring some common sense and some new ideas. I think I can still, as an administrator, assemble a good team. I want to make the criminal division much more robust to be able to deal with the rising crime issues, like I said. I also want to send a message to law enforcement that I have their back, and as the Vermont community, that we will have their back. I do not believe that we need to be defunding the police. We need to fully fund them, and we need to give them all of the training and equipment they need to do their jobs safely for Vermonters' safety and for their safety.
Think this defunding police experiment has failed?
I think it has failed miserably, and I think we need to address it now before it gets worse. We've seen all around the country in cities like Pittsburgh and Philadelphia and Baltimore, which I stopped traveling to because of the rise in crime when I was living in Maryland. We need to send a message. It's not like we are going to arrest our way out of this problem, but once we send a clear and concise message to would-be criminals, the crime will go down. Statistically, we have seen that before.
Should Vermont modify or cancel qualified immunity for police officers?
Absolutely not. This is not the time to do that. We have officers or would-be officers who will not be applying to the respective academies for departments they would like to join because of this intimidation campaign that we've seen with attacks on qualified immunity and defund the police. Law officers, whether they be sheriffs or police officers or even federal officers who might be assigned to Vermont, need to know that the state of Vermont and the citizens of Vermont have their back. And there are laws that law enforcement officers in this state are still subject to, just like you and I. The Vermont Criminal Code, the Civil Code, and they also operate under a code of ethics.
All right. Let me ask you about Proposal 5, one of the two constitutional amendments Vermonters will consider at the general election. We did a whole program on it here last week. You'd have to defend the Reproductive Liberty Amendment if you are Attorney General. How'd you feel about it?
If I was put in a position where, as Attorney General, I would have to defend it, I would be disappointed. But keep in mind, once I am sworn in as Attorney General, I'm sworn as the top law enforcement officer of the state to uphold the law, and that's what I intend to do. Just for your viewers to know, I am personally a no vote against it. I believe it is poorly worded. It's vague. It doesn't actually name abortion in the wording, and it doesn't give a gender or an age. That's very troubling to me. It's a Pandora's box, I believe.
All right.
And the narrative that's been put out there that this was an attack on abortion is I think it's very disingenuous and intellectually dishonest. The day after the decision, the Roe decision, the law in Vermont did not change. The Roe decision was basically an affirmation of states' rights, federalism. That's really, truly what it was. And I hope your viewers do the research and find out for themselves that that's truly what this was.
Your website says you're, and as you've just affirmed, a Right to Life supporter, a Second Amendment supporter. You stand for the national anthem. You pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States. Let me ask you about your thoughts on the Attorney General's role in terms of consumer protection, scams, robocalls. That's key to a lot of folks.
Yes, and I agree that the work that the Attorney General's office with regard to those must continue. And that would be one of the things I would probably actually increase the prosecutions of, and the going into more depth in finding out how to protect all of Vermonters from what's basically in essence is identity theft. Identity theft to me should be prosecuted as vigorously as we prosecute violent criminals, murderers, and rapists, because they still have the ability to ruin a person's life financially and possibly even get someone removed from their own home because of a scam or a theft, whether it be of money or a deed to a home. So I take that very seriously.
Finally, what's your relationship like with Governor Scott?
I have not met Governor Scott. In a recent event in Corinth at the East Corinth Fairgrounds, it was very well put by, I believe it was Guy Page, who said, when we get more Republicans like myself elected and more Republicans in the legislature elected, we will be able to make Governor Scott a better Republican. And I agree with that.
Michael Taglavia of Corinth, Republican candidate for Attorney General. It's been our pleasure to have you.
Thank you. Thank you very much for having me. I appreciate it.
We'll be back with the Democratic nominee in a moment. We had hoped to have our two candidates side by side, but scheduling conflicts this week did not permit that. So now our questions for the Democratic nominee for Attorney General, Charity Clark. Joining us this morning from Williston, Charity Clark, the Democratic nominee for Attorney General. Welcome back to NBC5 In Depth.
Thanks for having me.
Well, thank you. And congratulations on your big primary victory. Remind us why you got into this race.
You know, I spent the last 8 years working at the Attorney General's office, the last 4 as Chief of Staff of the Attorney General's office. And I look around and I see all of the challenges that Vermont is facing right now, whether it be global warming, reproductive rights, gun violence, and so on. And I feel that we need an Attorney General who can meet this moment in history, and just decided in May that I was going to run.
You're an attorney. Do you have to be a lawyer to be Attorney General? Should you be, in your view?
You don't have to be an attorney to be Attorney General. I think that it's helpful, and I certainly would encourage, voters to make that part of their calculation when they're deciding who to vote for. I am an attorney. I've been licensed in Vermont to practice law since 2005, and of course have experience working at the Attorney General's office.
Tell me a little. Tell us all a little of your personal story. You grew up in Southern Vermont, near and dear to my heart, all full disclosure.
Of course. I grew up in Southern Vermont. I grew up in a small town working in my family's grocery store. And, I worked my first day when I was 10 years old, stocking shelves. And I worked my last day actually when I was in law school. I worked as a cashier, and I got to see all kinds of people coming through my line in the checkout. People thriving, people struggling, people on their way to work. And I kind of saw it all. And I like to say I took the store with me when I grew up and became an attorney.
What would you do differently in the Office of Attorney General, or if you're to be successful this November?
There's one area in particular that I'm going to just highlight in answer to your question, Stuart. I would be the first woman elected Attorney General, and that one area that I want to focus on is domestic violence. In Vermont, there are 40,000 victims of sexual and domestic violence every year. 40,000 is a very large number, and I feel like we don't put enough emphasis on that problem and on that crisis. I want to get more involved, make sure that the Attorney General herself is getting around the state, meeting with folks who work in that space, and taking steps to ensure that we're doing everything we can to try to protect Vermonters and try to make steps towards solving the problem.
You alluded to Proposal 5, the Reproductive Liberty Amendment, Article 22, also on the ballot. You support it. I'm wondering if you can clarify, as you know your opponent does not, if you can clarify whether the language in that amendment, in your view, will mean that Vermont women will have the right to a late-term abortion.
You know, one thing that's important to look at is just the facts and the data. At this point, we don't have so-called late-term abortions going on in Vermont. You know, the overwhelming majority of abortions that take place are in those first 3 weeks, and a few beyond that. But it's really not something that's going on. I mean, we're hearing a lot about it because the opponents of Article 22 are trying to, they're grasping at straws to find a reason to compel people to not vote. Right now, what that article will do is enshrine rights that we currently have and make sure that they can't be taken away from us. I will be proudly voting in November for Article 22.
You earlier described yourself as a progressive-minded prosecutor. I'm wondering, we have a gun violence problem, particularly in Chittenden County. It's getting a ton of attention, as you well know. Was the defund police movement a mistake?
You know, I don't know about that, but I will say that I feel strongly that we all deserve to feel safe and be safe. Over the summer, I called for the creation of a gun violence task force to look at this, to make sure that we are collaborating and problem solving to the best of our abilities. I've noticed that since that time, Governor Scott has taken steps to create a task force of his own and begin trying to do everything that we can to address the problem. As Attorney General, I would look forward to being a part of that in January.
So do prosecutors need to be more aggressive in holding criminals to account?
Something that's really important to look at when you look at those who are committing crimes, you have to look at the whole person and know that there's a lot more going on than just the violent act. Something that's really important is to provide wraparound services and treatment services to those who are suffering from trauma or those who are suffering from substance use disorder, and so on. It's not going to be a long-term solution to just lock up the person without treating them. So I believe we really do need to treat the whole person and make sure that in solving the problem, we're doing a thorough job by providing those treatment services.
Do you think the legislature is wise to consider modifying or ending qualified immunity for police officers?
I believe in police accountability. It's important that we hold police accountable and that those who are harmed by police have an avenue of recourse. We're fortunate to have been looking at this issue for a couple of years in the legislature, and I, as Chief of Staff, was a part of that work. And at this moment in time, there is a lawyer who works for the legislature, Legislative Council, who's looking at this issue nationally and writing a legal memo for the legislature so that they have all the information they need to come back in January and start taking steps, imagining what qualified immunity should look like here in Vermont. And I'm looking forward to being a part of that process.
Have you thought much about what more the Attorney General's office could do in the area of consumer protection? No week goes by when we have not heard about some new scam, robocalls, some effort to separate us from our money.
Right. Yeah. As Chief of Staff, I oversaw the Consumer Assistance Program for 4 years. And before that was an attorney working in the consumer space. So I don't know that we've ever had an Attorney General who will be such an expert on consumer law as I will be in January. There are things that we can be doing and should be doing. First, let me note that there are 15,000 contacts made with consumers by the Consumer Assistance Program each year. So most folks in Vermont who interface with the Attorney General's office do so through the Consumer Assistance Program. It's something that's familiar to a lot of Vermonters. They do really, really good work mediating complaints between consumers and businesses. And they also do a really good job with scams. There's 5,000 scam reports made to that office every year. And it's frustrating because scams so often originate overseas. And there's really not much that we can do except educate and do outreach. But when I was Chief of Staff, I was overseeing a team working on the robocall issue, because robocalls that are initiated overseas, of course, they have a landing place when they come into this country at telecommunications companies here in the United States, facilitating that scam call, getting to Vermont. As Attorney General, I want to continue that work, going after that telecommunication company to make sure that we're doing everything we can to prevent those calls from reaching Vermont.
So we just have a few seconds left, but sum it up as we're a month out from the general. What do you want voters to know that is the key difference between you and your Republican opponent?
Well, as I said, I've worked for many years in the Attorney General's office. I believe strongly that I have the background and experience that we need at this moment in history to work on all of these issues facing Vermont right now. I also think it's really important that we elect for the first time a woman to the office. And I look forward to November 8th.
Charity Clark, the Democratic nominee for Attorney General. Thanks for being with us.
Thank you so much for having me.
and we'll be right back.